Hello there and welcome to the stream. Welcome to my small office studio. And if this is the first time you're watching this, then welcome. I'm Father Roderick. I'm a priest in the Netherlands, or located in the Netherlands, but working internationally on social media, mostly. Every week I record a podcast, and the name of the podcast, well, actually I do multiple podcasts, but the one that I'm going to record today is called The Break. If you go to your podcasting software and you look for The Break with Father Roderick, you'll be able to find it, I think. The other podcast that I record every week is The Walk. Also, The Walk, Father Roderick, you'll be able to find it. And then for my patrons, so the people that support me on Patreon, I record another podcast, which is called Story Secrets. More information about that one on my Patreon page, patreon.com/Father Roderick. So how is everybody doing? You may have noticed that the studio looks a little bit different. Well, actually, the studio didn't really change, but I changed the ingredients of the studio. So I moved the computer to the right side, so I have a little bit more room in front of me. I lowered the camera, so you have a bit more space. I changed the lights slightly, so I use a key light there. I have a filler light there, and then I've got a small light here that gives me a little bit of a hair light, although I don't have that much hair. and hopefully this looks fine. I don't know. Let me know if you're watching this, where you're from. Introduce yourself to the community. If you're one of the usual guests on the stream, then welcome back. So I'm going to record the podcast, which means that I'm going to be mostly focused on audio, because this is ultimately going to end up as an audio product. But that doesn't mean that there isn't also a video component. In fact, what I want to try to do more is to take segments of the show, because my show is always divided up in various topics. And to take these separate segments and to post them during the week on social media, but just that one segment, because I know that this is a show about basically anything that catches my interest, which also makes it very unfocused. And so I can imagine that some people would like to listen to this particular part or would prefer this segment. So I'm doing both. I'm bringing the show to my audio listeners, and they get everything. And then the people that follow me on social media, they get to see like these short segments, and they can just pick and choose. I'm currently streaming this on the YouTube channel. It's not my main YouTube channel, so I have several YouTube channels, and I'm trying to kind of refocus that a little bit, because right now my content is all over the place, and it's just way too much. And it's impossible to maintain these channels, so I'd rather focus on, I'd say 2 or 3 channels and do those really well, instead of having like a plethora of channels that I cannot possibly fill with content just because a day only has 24 hours. So this is the channel that I also use to stream Mass on Sunday. I always do that live every Sunday. In fact, I stream it on Facebook and I stream it on YouTube, because since I'm in that kind of like in the middle of all the time zones, I've got a lot of followers on the one side of the planet. So I should say this side of the planet. So that's all like quite a few viewers from Indonesia, from Asia, Germany, like Czechoslovakia, Poland, etc. All the way to down under to Australia and New Zealand. And then I've got, on the other side, I've got my American audience and my Canadian audience and South American audience, and they're all like still usually asleep when I'm awake, and vice versa. So since I'm in the middle, and since I want to be able to join as many people as possible with that Sunday Mass, which is meant for people that cannot go to church for whatever reason, I stream that in the morning. And this is new. I'm trying this out. I'm going to stream this in the morning at 8, or actually that would be 7 a.m. UTC, so Universal, what is that, Standard Time or something like that? What does UTC stands for? Time Central? I don't know. Anyway, so that would be 8 o'clock Amsterdam time, which is the Dutch time. So I stream it on Facebook. and then in the evening, we'll stream that same Mass here on this YouTube channel at 5 p.m. So that's evening here, and it would also be, I think, morning, so 11 o'clock a.m. On the East Coast, and 8 a.m. on the West Coast. And the thing is, most people actually do not watch the Mass live anyway. They watch it whenever they have time, or they just watch the homily. That's all fine for me. So I'm just going to be in the middle, and that has the added advantage for me to kind of free up my Sunday evening. Sundays for priests are usually very busy. So, for instance, this weekend I have to fill in for Father Henry, who is the pastor, actually, of the parish where I'm just an assistant priest, because the parochial vicar is currently on a pilgrimage to Kevelaer in Germany, so he's not available. And Father Henry has COVID, so he's still recovering. He's still in quarantine. And so I'm covering for him, which means that usually the weekends are very busy, and it's not that I have other days of the week where I can kind of recover my strength a little bit. So I hope that by doing the Mass early in the morning, I can reach more people from all the various time zones, and at the same time, it will give me a little bit more time off on Sunday after my last parish Mass is celebrated. So anyway, that's just a long introduction. Let's get ready for the show. I'm going to get my show notes ready. I still have to get used to the new disposition of all the materials. Like, my iPad is here. That's where I have my show notes. I'm probably going to mess this up during the show. And then the computer is there with your reaction. So I see that we have a few people already. We've got Jeanine. Jeannie. My eyes are getting worse. Martinez and Samuel. Oh, Coordinated Universal Time. That's what UTC stands for. Thanks, Sam. So Coordinated Universal Time. So I've decided to just go with that, even though that's UK time, so that we're like an hour ahead of that, because otherwise I have to like type in all these conversions, and people can probably just figure that out for themselves. All right, let me get my notes here. So we're week 39. Normally, actually, I would stream this probably on Thursdays, but this has just been a very busy week. So here we are on Saturday. And I need to hurry up because I have Saturday evening Mass at the parish. Otherwise, Father Henry is going to be feeling even worse than he already feels now that he has COVID. Oh, boy. Poor guy. And he picked it up in Lourdes, of all places. Jeez. You'd think that in that place where people find healing, that they'd be kind of protected against COVID. Not so. Okay, so I don't have any notes there. What is going on? Oh, here we go. Yeah, there we are. All righty. So, if you are ready, I'm ready too. Audio sounds okay-ish. It's a little bit weird to switch to headphones. All of a sudden, I hear myself very clearly. All righty. And while you're at it, if you're watching this after I've gone live, if you can, well, of course you can, give this video a thumbs up, because I want to grow this channel, and all that audience interaction helps. Leave a comment. I always have a Q&A section about faith, so if you have any faith-related questions, post them in the comments. I'll read everything. I'll reply as soon as I can, and maybe your question will end up next week on the show. Here we go. Hey there, and welcome back to my show. I'm Father Roderick, and this is The Break, coming to you from a cold, kind of sunny and rainy Dutch country. What is it? Town? Where do I live? It's weird weather. Fall is coming. I am bringing you this show without advertisements, thanks to my patrons. They support me every month. If you want to join them, and if you can help, if that is within your means, take a look at patreon.com/Father Roderick. And this week, I want to welcome two new patrons. We've got Daniel Smith and James Barkett. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Welcome to the community of patrons. I can't wait to meet you and to talk on our Discord server, which you get access to if you become a patron. It's going to be a blast, I guarantee.
Do you know what's going on? This is what's happening in your world.
Face it, Catholics rule. We got Boston, South America, the good part of Ireland, and we're making serious inroads in Mozambique, baby.
You've taken your first step into a larger world.
We live in scary times. And of course, the war in Ukraine is having a global impact. And it seems that the situation is only getting worse, at least from the drama side of things. So now Putin has declared that he is annexing parts of Ukraine, of course, completely against international law. And he keeps threatening with, using nuclear weapons, which, of course, would be catastrophic, no matter, how many he will use and in which capacity. It is a nuclear attack, if it's small scale or big scale, it is going to have such an impact on the world because, of course, there will be an immediate retaliation. And we cannot imagine what is going to happen, what will be kind of this domino effect of such a move. And I have to be honest, it's scary. I am scared when I hear people talk about that. And it just shows the idiocy of having nuclear weapons in this world in general. Like, yeah, it's meant to scare other countries from not going over whatever line we draw in the sand. But we know that if you use them, it's going to be horrible for thousands, tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of people. It will cause a chain reaction of other countries retaliating. And there are no winners. There can never be. That's, in fact, the case with this war in general. There can't be any winners. So what do you do when you feel scared like this? I ask myself this because as a priest, I'm supposed to bring you the good news. But how can you bring the good news in times where the bad news, the worrying news, the scary news is so overwhelming and makes you feel so small? And even as a priest, sure, what can you do? Thoughts and prayers, right? And that seems so futile almost, because these are things happening on a global scale that we seem to have so little control over, if any control. So what do you do when you're scared? When you hear talk like that? I mean, I never, ever imagined that we would be in this situation. In fact, I grew up in a time of optimism. The 80s, the 90s, it seemed like our economy was thriving. We had Star Wars. The computers were giving us all these new abilities to communicate with each other. There was this optimism around the internet. Like, the more people can meet each other and get to know each other, the more we will understand each other. And it turned out so differently. I'm not saying that all that progress has had no effect. In fact, what I do, the work that I do as a priest on social media would have been impossible without all those advances. And for me, my life has become so rich and so, so broad thanks to social media and thanks to how I can join you. And if you're watching this or if you're listening to this, it means it works, right? And we would never meet in real life if it hadn't been for this. So I'm not saying that doesn't count, but this medium of the social media, the news, the spread of news, and the way in which people can tweak the news and even fake the news has also had the opposite effect. It has brought people in conflict with each other. It has fanned the flames of conflict. And it's all about, in whose bubble are you, and who do you believe, and who can you believe, and who can you trust? And it's all this discord and all this, I'm not talking about Discord as a service. I love Discord, but it's all this, this strife and this opposition and the polarization in our societies that seem to make any optimistic view on life and on the future and on our current situation so naive almost. And so I wonder, what is my message as a priest? What should be our message as a church in this world that is so afraid and that is so polarized, and where people, because let's be honest, a lot of the fighting that goes on at the ugly side of the internet is ultimately, I think, fed by fear. It's fear of the unknown, fear of other people that are different, that make different choices. And it's our inability to just let those people be and to respect them how they are. Wars start because one party does not respect the other party, or both parties don't respect one another. And so the only way in which they think they can get peace is by using force and using violence and by destroying the other party. But that, of course, never truly leads to happiness. And I believe that it's very important that Ukraine defends itself against the aggressor, and that our world comes together and that we support one another in this situation. But ultimately, war is always a defeat of what we're called to be as humans. God gave us the ability to talk to each other, to learn each other's languages. We have a heart that can have empathy with other people, and especially with our enemies. Isn't that what Jesus tells us time and again? You love your enemies. It's easy to love your friends. It's easy to do good to people that do good to you. But try to be good to people who are not doing good to you, who are not your friends. Try to forgive them. Try to understand them. Try to listen to them. Jesus constantly does that. He talks with everybody, not just with his disciples, people that are part of his bubble, his followers. He's not just an influencer for the people that, want his influence, but he tries to impact the lives of people that are very far away from his own life and maybe even culture. He talks to Samaritans. He talks to Pharisees and scribes that are trying to get him killed. He even talks to Romans, this occupying force that makes life horrible and miserable for his own people. And yet he talks with them. There are even Romans that are converting, that are changing their lives because of him, because of what he shows them. And he never uses force. He never uses violence. He uses the persuasion of words. He talks, he listens, he dialogues, he challenges people, definitely. But he never mounts an army. He never uses his divine powers to crush people that don't agree with him. And we are called to follow his example and to be like him. And what is the road that Jesus shows us, or the way that he shows us out of this situation? It's to make the decision yourself to be like him and to do good in your own environment, in your own world. I cannot impact what's going on in Ukraine right now. I cannot influence global politics, but I can try to live out my faith and to be good, even to people that I don't agree with or people that have hurt me. I can try to forgive, and that's hard. That's difficult, but it's all these. If I do that and you do that, and we all start to do that, I think that is also creating a domino effect. You have this escalation of aggression, of the nuclear threat. I show you my weapons, you show me yours, and then it's just going to get worse. But there's also an alternative to this, and that's if people start to listen to each other and to respect one another. We have all a dignity that is given to us because we're all children of the same Father in heaven, and all our regional differences and political and religious and cultural differences, to God, that doesn't matter. He just wants to love us, and he hopes that we love him back. That's the only thing that matters to God. And so that's what we should do. And we should trust that ultimately that domino effect is going to have a global impact. But if we start to despair, if we start to let our lives be impacted by just fear, and we start to fear one another, and we start to kind of join this crazy rat race of violence and incomprehension and or verbal violence, then we're not going to heal this world. We can only do that if we try to act every day in the way that Jesus acts. And how do we know what Jesus would do? We go to church, we read the Bible, we try to be inspired by him, and we ask ourselves every time, how can I become more like him? That would be my advice in these difficult times.
How do you not like movies?
They're predictable. Like, the guy gets the girl, and that kid sees dead people, and Darth Vader is Luke's father.
Not liking movies is like not liking puppies.
They're fine. I just get bored and never make it to the end.
You know, you need a movie education. You need a movication. I'm gonna give it to you.
One of the documentary series that I cannot resist whenever it's on TV or when I find it on any streaming medium is Anthony Bourdain's travels. He's been creating these travel documentaries. I should say he was creating these documentaries because unfortunately he killed himself a couple of years ago. And that was a huge shock to anyone who was following him and who had been following him for years. But his programs and his travels are still being aired almost weekly, and he still has a huge following. And as an aspiring documentary maker myself, I've been watching his series for years, and I loved them. I so loved the style. It was so unlike any other documentary series or travel series that I knew, because it was surprisingly personal. And what I also thought was fascinating about Anthony Bourdain was that you saw him change over the years. Not only did he get better in telling stories, but it became more personal. His interview techniques became, I think, a lot better because he was more engaged. He was more personal. It was not just about food. Actually, it was especially in the latter years, was rarely about food. Food was kind of the hook. It was the thing that he was known for as a chef or a former chef. But it was about the people and about the cultures that he helped us discover. It was about dialogue and trying to learn from people that you would otherwise never meet. And that's why I love the medium of documentary, because it helps you. If you follow documentary makers, you start to broaden your own world. They bring you to places where you could probably never travel yourself. You get to see these personal accounts of people that are basically just like you. They live in a different country. Yeah, they may have different recipes, different culinary culture, but there's so much to learn from them. And there's also so much to recognize in other people. And that's one of the things I think that Anthony Bourdain did better over the years. So the reason that I wanted to talk today about Anthony Bourdain is that I just watched a documentary that was available on Amazon Prime, and it's called Roadrunner. And it's a film about the life and the career of Anthony Bourdain. So it's not a documentary series about food. It's not it is following Anthony Bourdain during his travels, but it's behind the scenes. It's also what is going on, what brought him to this point, what could have led to ultimately his the moment that he felt that he couldn't go on anymore, and he decided to kill himself. You know, that's always for people that have gone through, and I hope you've never gone through a situation like that, but I know friends, family members that have unfortunately have had that experience where some of their loved ones, even in my work as a priest, sometimes that happens when people as I say, euphemistically, step out of this life. But it always has a huge impact on people, and it causes so much hurt. But then, of course, there's always a lot of hurt in the person that decides to take that step. And so I was curious to see if this particular film would give us more insight in what led Anthony Bourdain, who was at the peak of his popularity, to do that, and to not only impact the lives of the people that worked with him on a daily basis, or his family, his daughter, his former wife, but all of us, just this global audience that he had, and that was like me, like why, what happened? What this film does really well is it shows you a very nuanced, complete picture. It doesn't only show you his successes or how he built his career. It also shows where he came from. It shows you, I think, in a very brutal way sometimes, his flaws, the stuff that he struggled with. And a lot of that struggle was still going on inside his head. But thanks to interviews with people that have known him very well, you get a bit of a glimpse of what was going on in his life, and how his career also impacted, I think, ultimately all his decisions, including his last one. So it starts to show you with, and this was new to me. Of course, Anthony Bourdain's career started with a book, not with documentaries. He wrote this kind of like insider's view of what was going on in the kitchen of a chef, and that was very brutal. Somehow, I mean, it was funny. It was very insightful. This was when books by chefs was not a thing yet. I think he was one of the first chefs who did that, and later on, everybody started to write books. But it was part memoir, part like behind the scenes in the restaurant business. And what struck me was that Anthony Bourdain actually was more a writer than he was a presenter. And you see him write at a very early age already, even before he had this massive success with his first book. He was already writing. He would write to friends. He would write these long emails or letters. He would write in his diary. And he's a pretty good writer. He knows how to tell a story. And that's how he caught the interest of people that approached him and said, "Hey, would you like to do a series with us? Let's go and travel and we'll film it." And it's funny to see how simple everything started. The two documentary makers was a couple, a married couple. They were following him, and it's still in the era of where everything was on tape. And you see those early documentaries, and it's all like, oh my gosh, you cannot. It's only 15 years ago, maybe, that we were still, filming everything on tape, and VHS would be the medium, and Blu-ray, nobody had heard of it, let alone streaming. It's unbelievable how quickly our abilities to film and to tell stories with beautiful shots, and just the technology has advanced so much, but also the quality of storytelling. Because those early documentaries, you see them now and you're like, wow, yeah, that's how we used to make television. But it's not that long ago. And then over time, you see him getting better and better. So the film, I think, shows you that in the beginning, it was not at all his thing. He was actually very bad at interviewing people. He would usually lock up when he was supposed to interview people, and then he would just sit at the table and he wouldn't talk. He would just say a few things like, "This food is good." And so the documentary makers really were like desperate. Oh my gosh, he's such a good writer, but he's just not a very good host. And so they try to push him. And then, of course, the moment, he's a very kind of, how do you say that, strong-headed person. So the more they pushed, the more he just kind of stepped away, and he was sometimes very difficult to handle. But what he could do was write superb voiceovers. And so he started to, like, after, when they were in already editing the footage, they still needed to make a story. And if you don't have good interview material, it's very hard to make it a coherent story. I know this from personal experience, because as a starting documentary maker, I still don't consider myself to be, but maybe that's my imposter syndrome, but I don't consider myself to be a documentary maker, but I'm getting there. I'm learning. One of the hardest things for me to do is always when I have filmed, like for instance, this past summer I was in Italy, as I filmed almost every day. I filmed something. We would visit places. I would try to show what I was seeing, but I didn't really have the occasion to interview other people. And so you come home with a lot of footage, and it all looks beautiful because it's Tuscany. I mean, what's not to love about Tuscany? But there's no story yet. And so the way you create a story is by writing. You write voiceovers, and that's, you kind of tell the story in hindsight. And that allows you sometimes to connect stuff that, while you were filming it, was basically unrelated. And that was something that Anthony Bourdain could do like almost no other host. And what I love and what I've learned from his style of writing is that he still made it very personal. We're so used to these kind of very slick documentaries where, like, in Tuscany, most people in the evening sit together with their family and have a wonderful meal. Pasta is always on the menu, of course, as is the second dish, which is usually meat or fish. Although vegetarian cuisine is also getting more and more popular and more common in a country that wasn't used to that type of cooking. I'm just exaggerating a little bit. That's a very kind of disembodied narrator. And since that is what a lot of documentaries are doing, where you don't know who is making the documentary, you just see stuff and then you've got this voice. Oftentimes it's not even the maker, it's not the documentary maker, but it's just a professional voiceover artist. And someone else, the editor or the director, may write the text, and then there's this other person who has got a good voice and just reads the text. But of course, we now live in a time where traditional television is on the decline. And what has exploded over the years is this very personal vlogging style. If you look at a vlogger, I'm just calling him a vlogger, but he's much more than that. But if you look at Casey Neistat, who is who has been making vlogs on a daily basis for years, and actually it moved back to New York City with his family, and he started to vlog again. And what strikes me about his storytelling technique is how personal he makes it. It's always, he's constantly the one who shows you the city. And that makes it so engaging because he's a very engaging personality. And it's not just him explaining stuff. No, it's don't tell, show. He takes you along. And then sometimes he will explain, but that's usually just a very small percentage of the overall vlog. Now, that personal style is something that Anthony Bourdain, through his voiceovers and through his quality as a writer, was able to use already way before vlogging became a thing. And it's interesting, you always wonder, was it the chicken or the egg? Who influenced who? But I think that his style of making his travel documentary so personal, I think did have an impact, or definitely mirrored the changing times. And now it's very hard, actually, to do conventional documentaries. And what I've learned from Anthony Bourdain is to not shy away from being very personal, which is something that I did when I was making TV programs. And oftentimes when I was writing, I was trying to explain. I was like the teacher. And now I realize, now that I see how Anthony Bourdain was putting his heart and his opinions and his humor into his voiceovers, I'm thinking, yeah, that's the way to go for me as well. That's how you engage people and you make it a story and not just a lesson. So that's something I definitely learned from this movie. And what I also found encouraging is that it shows how much practice makes perfect. Every year he got better, and every year he started to enjoy it more. And in fact, his work and that's not something I want to emulate, but his work became also his refuge, his escape. He had this very idealistic idea of starting a family and being the perfect father. And he tried hard for a couple of years. And then it started to scare him. Or I don't know, he was unable to balance his professional life and his family life. And so that relationship ended. And I think that isolated him from every. It's very hard if you have an ideal and you're in a business where you are constantly supposed to be this bigger than life kind of guy. And that's what he became through his fame. He was like the Anthony Bourdain, an institution. But it made him feel like he had to get better every time. And he had to, instead of focusing on what was his true dream, which was to be a good father. And I think he sacrificed his real dream to the dream that ultimately he assimilated from his fame, which I think this movie is a great warning because it makes you think about your priorities. What is more important? Is it to reach millions of people, to become famous, to become successful, to have a career that everybody envies? What good is it to gain all that if you lose the things that truly make you happy? And when you see the footage of him as a father and with his kid growing up, you can tell that those are the moments that he was truly happy. And when he's traveling and when he's working on his career, it's a flight, it's an escape, but you rarely see him happy. He is sometimes thrilled and excited, and there's a bit of that adrenaline rush, but that's not the same as happiness. And I think ultimately that is what broke him. He met this other woman, an Italian woman, and he got infatuated with her almost like a school kid. And then that went nowhere. And when it became public that she had actually also other lovers, it broke his heart. He never got over that. And that's, the breakup happened a year before he ultimately ended up killing himself. Which goes to show that even if you have millions of people that watch you all over the world and that admire you and give you thumbs up and everything, if you don't have a personal life where you actually are really loved by people that know you, not just as a public persona, but as you are, that accept you, not just your successes or your income or whatever, your fame, but accept also your failures, your struggles. If you have friends or family where you can truly be yourself and where your failures and your struggles are a reason for those people to love you more, that's, I think, how you ultimately become happy. And happiness has nothing to do with having a life without worries or without struggle. I think every person has struggles, even the Pope. But it helps so much if you have a life, and that usually is the opposite of a public life. But you need to have friends, if only a few, that know you and that care for you and that love you as you are. If you have that, all the rest is bonus. If you conquer the world, but you lose your soul because you don't invest in those personal, very personal, close relationships, then ultimately you end up with a life that is empty, a life that doesn't fulfill, no matter how much you fill it. And so that's ultimately the biggest lesson that I learned from this film, Roadrunner, is if your travels are just a flight, are just an escape, because you're afraid to commit to personal relationships, then that road is not a road you should take. Anyway, go check out that movie. It's on Amazon Prime, and it's hard to watch sometimes, but it's also incredibly impactful.
Catholics rock!
It's time for a visit to the Peculiar Bunch, and this is the place where you can ask anything you always wanted to know about Catholics, but you're afraid to ask.
Catholics can be a peculiar bunch. No meat on Friday.
Oh, meat? What do they eat? Light bulbs?
And even if you don't want to go to your local pastor to ask that question, you can always ask me, even anonymously. I'm happy to give an answer.
Man, you guys got more crazy rules than Blockbuster Video.
I would like to talk about silence and the value of silence and how much silence is something that we all need more of in our lives, especially today. And the reason that I want to talk about this is a question that I got from one of my followers, actually one of my patrons on Discord. And the question was, how does it work in monasteries where the brothers or the sisters that live there have pledged a vow of silence? What do they do when they get sick or when there is a fly in the soup? They want to complain. How does that work? Can they never talk? How, for instance, a priest who has made a vow of silence, how does that priest celebrate Mass? Do you just whisper, or how does that work? Now, this is, I think, a common misconception about monasteries in general. First of all, a vow of silence, that is not really a thing, I would say. Yes, there are congregations, there are monasteries, there are certain types of monks that will live a life mostly in silence, where they don't speak. That's very rare, by the way. You've got hermits who will just spend most of their lives not talking. And the idea behind that, of course, is silence is not just the absence of sound, but it's a space in which God can speak to you. And the more you shut up, the more it will create an opportunity for you to start hearing God's voice better. But even in the monastic world, this is very rare. Most monasteries that I know, most brothers and sisters that live a monastic life can speak. They will still have lots and lots of silence in their lives, but it's not forbidden to talk. But even in those rare situations where monks are living a life mostly in silence, it doesn't mean that they never can speak, or that it would be whatever, breaking their vows or a capital sin they need to confess whenever they utter a word. Now, in fact, in many situations, there will be times where they can talk and they will speak to one another. I know, for instance, sisters in a monastery that I visited several times to film, where the sisters will mostly spend the day in silence and in prayer, but every evening after supper, I think, they have an hour, and it's the social hour, and they talk and they laugh and they sing songs and they play games, and they socialize. And then after that, they go to the chapel and they say the last prayer of the day, and then it's silence again, and they won't speak. So it's not a contest in those situations to not speak. There's this joke where, and this is, of course, it's a story, so it has never happened, about this monastery where the monks are allowed to only speak once a year, and they can only say one thing, and then they have to shut up. And it always takes place during an evening meal. So there's this one evening where during dinner time, the monks can say one thing. And so there's this one monk who raises his hand, and the prior says, "You may speak." And he says, "There's a fly in my soup." And then silence again. And then the next year comes around, and when they're distributing the soup, there's another monk who raises his hand. He says, "There's also a fly in my soup." And then the year passes in total silence. And in the third year, during the distribution of the soup, the prior himself raises his hand, and he says, "I would like to say something. Can we please stop all that complaining about flies in the soup?" Of course, that never happens. However, the point is, silence is an extremely underrated aspect of our lives. I don't know what your life looks like. I do know what my life has looked like for most of my life. And silence was super rare. I was always trying to entertain my ears in a certain way. So after the emergence of podcasts, I would listen to podcasts every single waking moment of the day. Whenever I wasn't working, I was listening to a podcast. If I went out to go shopping, I would listen to a podcast. If I was on my bike on the way to church, I'd listen to a podcast. If I would go out for a walk, I would listen to podcasts. When we got all the streaming music services, I was listening to playlists all the time. Even if I was working at the computer, I would just put on my playlists on Spotify and would just sing along with the music. And then I had all these smart speakers in my house, and I'd put them in groups, and I could say, "Hey, play this playlist on all speakers," and then my entire house would be filled with music. And I even created like a morning playlist, an afternoon playlist, and a dinner time playlist. I even had like a reading playlist. So I would play like really soft piano music, very calm piano music while I was reading a book. It's madness. It's so weird. And a while ago, I think this was mostly after I moved here. I moved in exactly 1 year ago, by the way. I'm recording this on the 1st of October, the feast of St. Therese of Lisieux, my favorite saint. It's her fault that I'm a priest. I keep saying that. And I remember last year, on the 1st of October, that was the day that I was adamant about staying in this house for the first time. We'd been working on renovating the house for months, and I wanted to have my own house. So I put a mattress on the floor and I slept here. And then the house wasn't finished. So we still had to do a lot of work. But at least it was my house now. Still we didn't have heating. There was no internet. There was electricity. I didn't have TV. And I still fondly remember those early weeks here in this house. Because I didn't have internet, I hadn't set up my smart speakers. Most of my days were very quiet. During the day, I would hear the sound of the people working on the renovation, so that would be a lot of noise. And then in the evening, it would just be so quiet. And there is a road next to my house, and that makes a lot of noise during the day. But then in the evening, traffic starts to diminish, and then it gets really, really quiet. And I love that silence. And it was not, I'm not trying to position myself here as a super pious monk who then would spend every moment in silence just praying and asking God, speak to me. No, I was just enjoying how quiet it was in the house. And I would just sit in a chair and read a book. And that would be it. I didn't need piano music in the background to enjoy the book. In fact, once I started reading, I was in a different world anyway. And then I started to apply that to other moments of the day as well. So I used to always, whenever I woke up, the first thing I would do was to grab my phone, start browsing, start listening to the very first, usually to news podcasts that were aired or posted the evening before, and I wanted to catch up on what was happening in the world. And then I would continue to listen to that while I had my breakfast. I don't do that anymore. I don't grab my phone. I start usually by journaling. So I've started the bullet journal method, which I will talk about at some other time as well. And that is deliberately, it's an offline thing. I just use pen and paper, which I've never done in my life. But I don't want to start my day with screens. I don't want to start my day with news. I just want to focus on, okay, so I have this entire day ahead of me. What am I going to do? What are my priorities? What didn't I do yesterday? Is it still important? Or can I just cross that off my list? And just having that, and it's just a short time. It's about, breakfast, half an hour, journaling, half an hour. But it's an hour that I've come to cherish so much. And then, of course, I'll start listening to the news, usually when I start doing the dishes or whatever. But starting the day in silence has been a major game-changing. What, game changer? How do you say that? It's been game-changing, life-changing. And I notice that the more silence I have during the day, the more I also miss it when it's not there. And during my summer holiday, I was talking with Father Henry. And he invited me to join him during the Easter Vigil. And Easter Vigil is the supreme moment of liturgy in the life of the church. It's usually a very, very long celebration, several hours. And he wanted to know what I thought of that. And I told him, honestly, I had a hard time. I didn't like it at all. And he was like, what? You didn't like it? But it's a beautiful liturgy, and we had this choir, and I was like, that was the point. There was just so much going on, and it was nonstop. Talking, singing, moving around, lighting candles. It was just, there wasn't a single moment of silence during that celebration. And it was true. It was absolutely true. And I told Father Henry, for me, that is, I'm not used to that anymore. I used to celebrate like that, but it feels so we're as if we're like rushing through that liturgy. We need to do so many things. We need to cross it off our list, and then once we've completed everything, we score maximum points. But I felt like I haven't had a moment to let things sink in. We read a ton of readings. But you can't really think about that reading because immediately the choir starts to sing and you need to sing along, right? And then there is the homily, which I didn't have to do. Father Henry was doing a homily. But instead of having the time to think about that afterwards, immediately we went to the profession of our faith or the renewal of our baptismal vows and whatnot. And it was just the entire time, even after communion, it's the most intimate moment of Mass. And then it was immediately like the organ started to play and the choir started to sing like 3 orchestral pieces. And it was, it felt so busy and so much overkill. And I said, honestly, next year, I don't think I'm going to join you for that Easter Vigil because I need more silence in my Mass. And then it's something that I also try to always be aware of when I'm celebrating myself. Even if I'm just streaming Mass on YouTube, it's to have these moments of silence. And it doesn't have to be 10 minutes, but just a minute or so, or 30 seconds even. But taking a moment, like for instance, the opening prayer in Catholic liturgy, you say, let us pray. And then what most priests do is, let us pray, oh Lord, you who blah, 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 blah. And we start talking. But it's the collection prayer. You're meant to say, and this is actually stipulated in the Missal, let us pray, followed by a silence. And during this silence, we all pray. And it's the prayer of the priest. It's the individual prayer of the parishioners. And then the worded prayer is like a collection of all these prayers and a formulation. But it's the most important thing about that prayer is not the words, but it's the silence. And prayer is not just telling God stuff, but prayer is opening your heart so that he can tell you something. And oftentimes God doesn't even use words, but he will speak to you. And the more you create moments of silence in your life, and the more you evaluate your own spiritual journey, the more you will see that silence can actually give you much more insight in what God wants of you and asks of you than if you're just busy filling your life with input and input and input. And it's even if you're not religious, it's I think, well, I don't have scientific data, but I wouldn't be surprised if psychologists could tell us that silence and having times of meditation in your life where you shut up and you don't play music or you don't constantly bombard your own senses with information or entertainment, that can have a very, very beneficial effect on your overall mental health, let alone on your spiritual health. So this would be my tip for this week, for this upcoming week. Try to find a few moments, maybe 3 moments during the day, where you resist your own urge to fill it with noise. There will be a lot of noise that you cannot escape. There will be a lot of stuff that you have to keep track of. But if you can, try to find 3 moments, maybe in the morning, maybe during lunchtime or after lunchtime, and maybe before you go to bed. Find a few minutes of silence and see how that impacts you. And even if you don't like it, because people get nervous when it's quiet, and especially if you've been addicted to noise and music like I have been for many years of my life, it will feel a bit unsettling, but I guarantee you, if you keep at it, it will become super precious to you, super valuable. So try it out.
When did you become an expert in thermonuclear astrophysics?
Last night. The packet. The extraction theory papers. Am I the only one who did the reading?
I'm having something in my hands here, and I'm so proud of this. This is my very first bullet journal. And it is basically a collection of pages, about 160 pages. It's got an awful, like, cringe-inducing pink color with flowers and butterflies on it. This is clearly geared towards, I would say, teenage girls. It's got a ribbon, like an elastic ribbon, that is also like a darker shade of pink that holds it together. And it's got a metal ring system, so if you open the pages, it can lay flat on the table. The pages themselves are white, but if you look closer, you see that there are actually lots and lots and lots of tiny dots on the page. No lines, just dots. And they're about, I would say, 0.5 centimeter apart. What is that in inches? I don't know. Just a tiny little bit apart. And so the dots themselves are barely visible, but they are super useful if you're writing, because they will still give you a bit of like orientation. Normally, if I try to write on white pages, my handwriting goes all over the place. Actually, I have terrible handwriting. So I switched at one point to just capital letters, or what do you call that? Anyway, but then having these dots allows me to be very, I don't know, just to write in a legible way. Now, I'm using this. The reason that I bought this is, first of all, I needed a bullet journal, and I tried to find something that was affordable because I wasn't sure that bullet journaling or bujoing, that's how the bullet journal addicts call it, would be something for me. But I read this book called the bullet journal method. It's written by Ryder Carroll. And I already talked about this, I think, on this week's episode of The Walk. So if you go to your podcast software and you type in The Walk with Father Roderick, you'll be able to check out that episode. And this what fascinated me about this method is that this is not just about time management, but it's all about evaluating your life and your priorities. And it's been super helpful for me. So I've been using the last days of September to kind of start working on the journal. You need to make some pages that are dedicated to an index. And this is all offline. So the method is really not for people who'd like to blog or journal on their laptop or on their iPad. I still do that every day, but this is different. Actually, the handwriting itself is an integral aspect of the method, because writing itself, the effort that you have to put into writing, actually helps you. I'll explain in a minute how. So you create an index, 4 pages, and that is usually, this bullet journal is meant to last for about a year. And in the index, you can write, okay, so you number your pages, and it helps you to say, well, hey, this month is on page so-and-so. Or if you have part of your journal maybe projects, you could say, hey, this project is described on page so-and-so. So you need that index. And then it starts, and this is fascinating, starts with a future log. A future log is 2 spreads, so 4 pages in total. And you divide those spreads into 6 months. And in this future log, you write something that you actually are supposed to prepare before you start filling in your journal. And that is, you make a list of, I also explained this in The Walk, so my apologies if this is a bit redundant for those of you that listen to that episode. You make 3 columns. In one column, you write down, and you have to be very honest, what am I currently doing? What am I working on? How am I filling my days, basically? And you write down everything. The middle column is, what should I be doing? What is on my to-do list, but I'm not actually doing it. It's like all the stuff that I know is important, but I'm not doing it, but I should do it. And then in the third column, you write down, what would I rather be doing? So that's about dreams. It's about long-term goals. And so it's only the first column that gives you a mirror and shows you, well, all those, it's nice to have dreams. It's nice to know your priorities. But if it's not something you're actually doing, then it's as if it doesn't exist. So, of course, the trick is then to figure out that how do I get all those things that I wrote down? And they're all important to me. If they weren't important, I wouldn't be doing them. If they weren't important, I wouldn't say that I should be working on them. And if they weren't important, they wouldn't be part of my dreams, right? So you go through that list and you ask after everything you wrote down, is like, well, why am I doing this? Is this really important? Or am I just doing this because I've always done it like that? And so you're invited to be brutally honest about that, and to be very strict, because it's all about ultimately, how am I going to spend my time? What am I going to do with this one life that has been given to me? And every day you spend on this planet is a day that will never come back. And so the things that you're actually committing yourself to had rather be really valuable to you or to the people around you. If not, they should go. Now, once you've done that exercise about kind of filtering out what is truly important to you, you then start to add that to your future log. You basically say, this is when I want to do this. Now, of course, this may change over time, but you have to kind of put it somewhere. If it's not in your future log, then it's probably not important. And it's only about a year. So you're not going to plan for next year. Sure, you can have these ongoing dreams, but it's like I would like to retire with $1 million in the bank. That's a nice dream, but you had better start working in the upcoming months on very specific ways and steps towards that goal. So anyway, that's how you create that future log, and then you start basically with the month to come. For me, that's October, and on one page you put all the days of October, and on the right side you make of the spread you make a list of all the things you want to get done in this month. It's only one page for a reason, so that you don't overcommit yourself, because a month may seem very long, but it goes by very quickly. So here on my right side, let me just read to you what I've written here. So I want to commit myself in October to record the break weekly. I already did that, but I still wrote it down. I want to do one thing differently this week or this month, and that is I want to create these separate segments. I always had segments in my show, but I want to record them in such a way that I can also cut them out and repost them as individual videos. So that's the only new commitment. Requires a little bit more preparation. Then I want to record a number of Story Secrets podcasts, which is the podcast that I record for my patrons. And this month, it's going to be focused on Andor, the new Star Wars series. So I wrote down I have to record one episode where I talk about the 4 currently available episodes of Andor, and then every week I want to do a commentary on the subsequent episodes. I wrote down anime shorts, TikTok. That's important for me to keep connecting with that audience. Every week I will assist in one of the parish churches here. Twice a week, I commit myself to run and to go to my training group, to join my training group. That's a commitment. Twice a week, on Tuesday evening and on Saturday morning. I also, and this is where it gets scary, I want to commit myself to doing, and this is an experiment, to go live every day of the week at 5 a.m. daily. And I want to go live to be able to connect with my audience. And that can be a TikTok audience, can be YouTube, it can be you, it can be on podcast, it can be my patrons. But no matter what happens, every day at between 5 and 5, let's say 5:45, I want to be there for my audience so they can ask questions. And it's not going to be just a live stream of me recording a podcast like I'm doing when I'm recording the break. No, it's actually going to be an encounter. You can ask me questions. We'll just have fun, talk about stuff. Anyway, so every day. And then I also commit myself to stream Mass every Sunday for an international audience. So that's what I've currently here. There are going to be more items on this list. It's just that I ran out of time this morning. So then you move that. Okay, so approximately how am I going to divide that over the month? And then that's where the real thing happens. And this is where the book is so important, because it talks you not only through the steps of how to do your daily logging, but also the second half of the book is all about why is this important and how does this change you? And the trick is to keep doing this for several months. That's already in itself a huge commitment. But seeing how much journaling every day has impacted my life in a positive way, and that's free-form journaling. It's what I do on my iPad. I want to give this a chance and commit myself until the end of the year to do this every single day. And so once you start doing the daily logging of your activities, you use very simple symbols like a dot this is a commitment. This is something I need to do. It's a task. At the end of the day, you cross it off, or you say, hey, I'm going to move this over to the next day, or I'm never going to do this month. I'm going to move it back to the future log because life's too busy. So you always, like every task that is on your daily list will get evaluated. And that's the strength of the system. And it can also be that you realize at the end of the day, hey, I put this task down, but I didn't get around to doing it. And you know what? It's really not important. I will just cross it off. And it just disappears from my life. So it helps you to constantly evaluate what you do. You can also use that daily log or that daily list of bullet points to write down your thoughts. And you just use a little trait, like just a little, what is it? Horizontal, how do you call that? I don't know. A horizontal thing. And then you can just then, but the reason is you do it in bullet points. So you make it, it's not a long form. It's not a big story. It's just, hey, I had this thought, or I just heard this amazing, I had this amazing insight. I just try to write it in one phrase. So I can always find it back later on. If you have appointments or events, you do an open circle. And that's just something that happens. So like I don't know, I've got a dinner with friends, or we're having a board game evening. That's an event. So you mark that down. And then over time, you start to, if you do that every day, you get much more grip on what you do and how you feel your days. It gives you the accomplishment, this feeling of gratification when you actually have been able to accomplish all your tasks. And it's this ongoing quest to evaluate, is this really worth my time? Is this worth being in my life? And every month you look at, before you start, and actually you should do that every day, you take a look at what were my monthly goals here. So you don't lose track of that. You may even glance at your future log. What did I write down here for this month? What's coming up next month? And so you also never lose track of the big goals in your life, your dreams, because it's always there. And before you start making the bullet points, you look through that list and you remind yourself, oh, this is what I truly want to do. This is my dream. I should never lose track of my dream. But it means if I want to keep that dream alive, I have to translate that into daily actions towards that goal, towards the realization of that dream. And with that, we've come to the end of another episode of The Break with Father Roderick. Sorry that was a little bit, maybe a bit wordy from time to time, but it's probably also because I'm trying to do these kind of well-rounded segments. I'd rather go in depth a little bit more and take a bit more time and to rush over stuff just to get to the end of my list. And I've got a lot of other topics that I would like to talk about, but they can all wait until the next time we meet again. If you want to meet me more often than just once a week, I invite you to follow me on social media. I'm Father Roderick almost everywhere. And make sure that if you watch this on YouTube to like and subscribe, because that's how you get notified whenever I go live or whenever there's a new video. And also, let me know if you have any questions for me, suggestions, reactions. Let me know in the comments as well. If you're a part of my Patreon community, you can always also reach me through Discord. I go there every day. It's my favorite place to hang out with you. I want to end with a inspirational thought from Star Wars Andor, and it comes from an Imperial Major Partagas. And he says, the longer we wait to identify a disorder, the harder it is to treat the disease. Now, he uses that as an Imperial in a very negative way, but I think it's also true for yourself. Sometimes try to evaluate your life and see what doesn't work and address it right away so that it doesn't get out of hand. Thanks for listening. See you next week. God bless. How was that? Oh, wow. That was tricky. I feel like I'm a bit too wordy. Like these segments go on a bit too long. I had 3 more segments. I had food and health. So I wanted to tell you about my sauerkraut dish. And I wanted to talk about the Quest Pro and the Quest 3 and about a video game, Disney Dreamlight Valley. Well, that was actually it. Just two items. Or, well, 3 if you count gaming as a separate item. So, yeah, I felt it was more important to stay within the confines of 1 hour, roughly, rather than trying to rush through my list. Let me know if this works. And let me just join you here on the chat. Where can I see the chat myself? Because I cannot read. Well, actually, I can put on my glasses. I can take a look at what you all are talking about. So obviously, since I'm streaming this on the channel where I used to stream only Mass, it still need to find its audience, but there are more than 2,000 people subscribed to this channel. And I know that the algorithm of YouTube will kick into gear if I start doing daily updates on this channel. So mind my words. In a few weeks from now, it will be very busy during these live streams. Let's see. From what I heard about it, sounded good. I kind of like the more in-depth content. Good. Sam says, I should take 22, 25 minutes every day and pray the rosary. If that works for you, sure. I have to say, honestly, I don't do that. But I'm usually, if I pray the rosary, I usually pray it when I'm in distress, like at the end of a marathon and I still need to run for an hour. It's like, okay, now I need some help. 5 a.m. No, it's not 5 a.m. It's 5 p.m. Michiel. So it's still going to be 5 p.m. on YouTube, and it's 8 a.m. on Facebook. Sorry for the confusion. When I try silent time, I just wind up talking to myself in my head. Yeah, I do that too. Well, I do it much less than I used to. I was often talking to myself, and now I'm more. It's maybe because I'm also just journaling so much that I write it down and it's out of my system, so I don't need to tell myself anymore. I really like how you let us take a moment before starting Mass to recollect ourselves in live stream. Yeah. The silence, even before you start, is also for me. It's just like usually there's so much panic around technology. Is it all working? Is the audio working fine, etc.? I need that moment of transition. Palamida says, I tend to keep busy and avoid quiet time. Yeah. Well, then the question you could ask yourself is, why do I keep avoiding that? What am I afraid of? You know, is there something that I don't want to experience when I'm getting quiet? You could do some soul searching. But if you are afraid, if you feel that you're resisting silence in your life, I think it is worth doing some soul searching, because it's probably your mind trying to tell you something. Because I think normally silence shouldn't be an issue in our life. So if it is an issue, then the silence is not the issue. There's something else going on. Yeah, the joke has many variations, I suppose. I'm glad to hear that, Samuel. That's great. Going to church is an important way to not just for yourself, but also to connect with the community and create a certain rhythm. Also, it's like me going to my training group. I'm not always in a mood to go running. Like this morning, it was raining. It was cold. I was like, you know what? I want to show up for my friends there. And every time I come back, I'm like, I'm so happy I went there, even though it was cold and it was miserable and it was raining. But man, it was good. Oh, Jeannie, you're running a half marathon. Oh my gosh, wow. The Hokie half. Good luck. Good luck. I admire you. Alrighty. Well, that wraps it up for me. I'm going to take a break and create some silence in my own life. After talking for more than an hour, I usually get a bit hoarse, so I'm going to drink something, stretch my legs a little bit. I was glad to join you live, and let's do this again next week. I'll let you know in advance on my socials when that will be. Probably not on a Saturday, but maybe on Thursday. I'll keep you posted. Thanks for your input, and have a wonderful weekend. See you later.